Hello to all the book lovers around the world. Welcome to the first episode of the Bibliophile. Welcome to the first episode of the Bibliophile Circle. The word bibliophile literally translates as somebody who collects books or is a book lover. And this is nothing but a book lovers circle. We decided to create a virtual book lovers club where we could come together, gain insights, share ideas, thrash each other out on our understanding of a book. This is not a book summary or a book review club. We would sit and thrash ideas, and we would also build upon or critique a concept in a book if we so believe in. My name is Nomad Nasrullah, and I'm joining you from the Funworks space in Dubai. And I have with me over here Hamad bin Arif, who's joining us from Sydney. And as I said, this is a virtual book club. So all those who are live with us, do drop in your name in the comments box. Whichever platform are you on, YouTube or Facebook, do drop in your name in the comments box, as well as which city you are joining us from. So how did this idea of a book club came about? I've always loved books. I've always read books. I posted on Facebook trying to find out what are some of the books that people are reading in my circle. And there were lots and lots of posts, lots and lots of comments coming in. And this gave the idea of why not start a virtual book club. And एक comment वहाँ पे था जी, जिसमें लिखा था कि जी अमूमन लोग जो है वो चीप बुक समरीज ढूंढ रहे होते हैं और बुक की डेप्थ में जो है वो नहीं उतरते और बुक की डेप्थ को जो है वो जाकर एक्सप्लोर नहीं करते. So this book club is not about book summaries, as I said. It's about challenging each other and learning from the books. Language would be ideally the language jo kitab ki language hai. So if it's a book in English, then we would of course have a book in the language would be English. If it is a book in Urdu, then the language would be Urdu. If it is a book in Sindhi or Pashto, probably my guest would speak that language. I might not be able to speak that language. But that's primarily what the idea is. The book that we've chosen today is The Richest Man in Babylon. And it is all about financial management. And interestingly, Hamad is an avid book reader. He writes great book reviews. I will share with you his Instagram blog where he reads a book and he reviews it. Rather, he does a detailed postmortem on a book whenever he writes a review. And Hamad is an old friend. We go back to probably 99, Hamad. That's when we met in FAST.
That's
So yeah,
right.
99, and then Hamad was in Dubai from Karachi, and then he moved on to Sydney. So yeah, so the book is all about financial management. I have never personally read a book on financial management. So ideally, in a book club, you're supposed to read the book and then discuss. But we've twisted it a little bit. Even if you've not read the book, let's learn from each other on this. So why financial management? We'll also talk about that in a little while. There are a few people who are joining us. Zan Goplani from Karachi. Hi, Zan. Farhad from Funworks. I know, Farhad, that you're in Karachi, so I would just say that hi, Farhad from Karachi. Ali Mama joins us from Karachi. Shahina joins us from, it says, Satarjas. Shahina, आपका comment पूरा complete नहीं आ रहा है. I'm unable to recognize the city. So Atia is joining us from Karachi, and Ivana is also joining us from Karachi. Great, Hamad. So, little introduction about you and why books. Before we go into The Richest Man in Babylon, why books?
Thanks a lot, Noman. It's been a great pleasure. Thanks for inviting me, and all the viewers. Thanks a lot for joining in as well. I just want to make one clarification first. Noman said we are old friends. Well, not. I am not that old. We're still young, but we happen to have met at a very young age, and so that's how we are old friends. Coming to the books, you can live 1,000 lives if you read books. You can live the experience of others. I love to travel, for example, but I can't really do overseas travel throughout the year. I do it once or twice a year with my family.
Yeah.
So, but I can satisfy this habit of mine by reading travel books, for example. I may not be the most successful person in the world, but I read the books about successful people. And that's how I learned that how do these people tackle the situations, normal day-to-day situations that I face in my life, and what will be the best response to that. So books teaches you about that. But that's one thing. The other thing is that I also have some interest in personal finance. And when I'll come to the book, I'll explain more about it. But I also try to follow what billionaires, millionaires, rich people do. And one of the key correlation you find every single time is that a big majority of them are book lovers. There are stats every year say 86% of wealthy people love to read books, whereas only 26% of the poor people have the same habit. And it's not just any kind of books. Most of the time, they are interested in self-help, self-improvement books. So they try to improve themselves all the time through the books, or they use audiobooks for their spare time, etc. I mean, that's one good reason to learn about the books.
Great. And Hamad, now the books are also digital. There are some people who are all about paper. I see a real good piece of art behind you where there are some books pasted to a clock. So digital, yeah, paper.
Paper. If I have to choose one, it has to be paper. I prefer that feeling of crisp paper in your hands. The smell of the book paper, it's great. Having said that, there's nothing wrong with digital as well. You can bookmark pretty easily in those pages. If the writer has a very hard language, you can easily look up the meanings. So do not stop that habit if you cannot get hold of a paper book. So I prefer to get a paper book, but if I can't get hold of it because of shipping delays or unavailability, then I switch to the digital one as well.
Right. So let's jump into our book for today, right? And all those who are joining us just now, this is the first episode of the Bibliophile Circle. The word bibliophile, as I said before, means a book lover, literally. And that's what this circle is all about. The book that we are about to deep dive into is called The Richest Man in Babylon. And it's all about financial management. And usually we don't read financial management, and I think in these COVID-19 days, a lot of people's financial management has taken a toss also. So Hamad, why financial management?
Okay, so you learn about physics and maths and other topics, regardless of what your major subject of study is. You do get some fundamental education about this. But if you look at your life, you have to deal with finances, personal finances, the moment your dad stops paying you pocket money. Actually, you can do finance with the pocket money as well. But once you turn an adult, then you have to, all of us live in a house, either we pay the mortgage or we pay the rent. We buy cars, we have credit cards. Sometimes we have to deal with so-called plastic money. So we do deal with finances. It's just that we have never been given any formal education in that. Imagine when you get 18 years old, you are legally now eligible to drive a car, but you can't do that unless you get a formal training in driving the car.
Right.
But at the same time, you also become eligible to get a credit card to apply for a mortgage. And usually the first education you get about these is from the people from the bank who wants to sell their card or the mortgage. And their advice would always be a bit biased. So if
Correct.
you educate yourself on personal finance through the books and some other means which I'll talk about, that bias would be removed, and you would be better able to handle all those finances.
All right, great. So we would deep dive into The Richest Man in Babylon. All those who are live, do share your comments and insights. And if you've read the book, do share your feelings, your experience, your comments about the book. So Hamad, let's deep dive into The Richest Man in Babylon. What is this book all about? What are the key lessons? And what are some of the action items that we can take from this book and start applying in our lives?
Sure, I'll talk about whom this book is for first. So there's an education aspect of it, as we just talked about. If you're already good with your finances, you might have read some books already on it. You may have substantial savings to show. This book might not be for you. It's a beginner book. It's a simple gives you timeless. It's a timeless classic. So it has excellent ideas, which applies regardless of time and place. But at the same time, these are simpler ideas. So this it will not specifically tell you that which stock to invest in, for example, or which credit card is the best in your country. But it will give you general ideas, which I'll talk about in the lessons part. The other thing is that there is this fun aspect of a book. Sometimes the books are great in terms of the technical education or information they provide. Like there's a book called The Selfish Gene, and it has excellent scientific knowledge. I like that, but it's such a dry book that I can't read more than 5-10 pages in a same sitting. This is
Yeah.
not the case in this book. So it's written as a story. There's a backdrop of a story in it. It's set up in an ancient time, in an ancient city of Babylon. And there are some nice advices about the financial management given by an old rich friend to a younger friend who wants to become rich. A small book, only about 150 pages. You mentioned you haven't read it, but I think you could read it in just a few hours. Other good thing is it has only 7 chapters, and each chapter I think could be read, say, 15-20 minutes. And there's no need to read the whole book at once. There's no need to understand the context if you're reading some chapter at random. So you can read.
Personally, I don't. It's very rare that I read a book cover to cover. Right, I would
Sure.
usually have 3 or 4 books going parallel, and I would pick up one chapter from here and there. So as you said that it's not necessary to read the whole book once, but yeah. Do you read book cover to cover, or do you go different books at the same time?
Yeah, I think I have a mild OCD. I want to read cover to cover. If when I skip few pages, I just feel uncomfortable deep inside.
No wonder you are a software engineer, right? You could sit in one place and type that code,
Yeah,
and that's why I left
yeah,
software engineering completely.
yeah.
Great. Okay, Hamad. So yeah. So let's get into the lessons of the richest man in Babylon, and how can we improve our financial management?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, these are some general, nice, timeless advices. So out of these 7 chapters, each chapter is about a particular topic, and you can, as I mentioned, you can read it in any order. So it starts with a very basic advice. It says that you need to pay yourself first, and I would like to explain that. What does it mean? Whatever you spend after getting your salary on your expenses is not your money anymore. So if you're paying electricity bill, if you're paying your rent, if you're paying your car loan installment, if you're eating out in a restaurant, that money is gone.
Mm.
Now imagine that today your government in your country announces that there will be 10% extra tax on your income that you have to pay. There's no other option, right? It's a government. They'll send you to the jail. What this book is saying, that keep that 10% aside. Just imagine that this has been taken away from you. You can't do anything about it. And that has to be your minimum savings. If you ask me, I think even 20% is manageable quite easily. Some of you might be thinking 10% is hard, but I can tell you 20% is also doable. And since this book is quite old, 10% may be a little bit outdated advice. Just think it this way, 5 or 10 years ago, most of you would be earning less than what you're earning today. And you did fine at that time as well, right? So if you can live in 10 or 20% less income at that time, you could probably do it now as well. So that's the first lesson. Save something, ideally 20%, but at least 10%. The
Mhm.
second thing is that you need to control your expenses. Now, I'm not saying that you start, say, living in a start driving 20 years old car and stuff like that. If you want to buy the latest model of iPhone, by all means do it. If you want an expensive holidays with your family, do it. Whatever you want to do. What you need to ensure that your 90% of income is financing this. If you
Mhm.
are paying expenses through your credit card, if you're paying these expenses through that the other 10%, you're doing it wrong. So you just need to ensure that your once you've paid yourself, whatever amount is left, you manage your expenses within that. Or otherwise, just remember the jail that's going to happen because of not paying the tax to the government.
It's like a tax imposed on us, but, I know we decided to keep the language, which was the language of the book, but this cannot be said in English. So ये वो भत्ता है जो हम अपने आप से ही लेते हैं basically, और एक savings account में डाल देते हैं. Yeah. All right,
Yeah,
Ahmad.
sure.
So
Yeah.
10% savings. All right, that's
That's
lesson.
a
No
yeah,
matter,
that's a buffer to your future self.
yeah, no matter
Yeah.
what.
The
All
the
right.
third Third lesson is about multiplying your money. So in these COVID days, probably you would think that the cash is the best option, but these are exceptional circumstances. If you had invested in oil, most likely you would be in a very bad shape right now. But in general, you risk a lot more in long term if you keep your savings in cash. Your money should be working for you. And another lesson within the same chapter is that you should not take advice from people who have nothing to show for that. So if your Chacha's, Mamu's, Bhavi's cousin is telling you that you would invest in the Bitcoin, it will make you a millionaire, don't do that. That's a greed. Look for persistent saving. Go for things that you know about. So if I'm a software engineer, I would most likely I would want to invest my money in the stuff where technology is involved because I have a knowledge of that. It's hard for someone to make fool of me in my own area. If you are, say, if you're a marketing guy, probably it makes a lot of sense for you to make YouTube videos and try to earn from that because that's your expertise. So try to increase your savings invested, but don't become greedy. That's not a good idea. Try to do stuff in your own area of expertise.
So, Hamad, this reminds me of a question. This gives a questions in my mind. The author himself, does he practice what he preaches?
Very good question. So the book was in 1920s. He was definitely not the richest man of his time. If you look, I think there have been Rockefeller, Dale Carnegie, and other people who made much more money. So you have to be a little bit skeptic about it. I wouldn't say that he was ultimate genius in his field of work, but at the same time, he had reasonably successful life. The author has served in the army, and he started some small businesses where he had a moderate, reasonable success. So follow his advice, but with a pinch of salt. That's what I would say.
Right. And as we were discussing before we started the live broadcast, this is a classic. Though written in 1920, it still holds its ground, and the learnings are still true for today.
Yeah. As you can see, the lessons I'm telling you, these are still very much valid for today. When the book was written, there was no Bitcoin, but there was greed. There was no credit card, but there was debt. And those advices about debt and Bitcoin are still valid in today's time.
Right.
With the lessons. So far we are talking about having a saving and investing it, but there's one more very important aspect of your life, and that is your health. And anything unforeseen could happen at any time. Accidents could happen. Your health could deteriorate. Things could happen to your house. In Australia, we have bushfires and earthquakes all the time, so you could lose.
COVID-19 can happen, God forbid. Yeah.
I just don't want to take that name. Sure. So anything unforeseen could happen, and what you need to do is to plan for it. So anything that could impact your personal finance or your personal life significantly should be insured through home insurance, car insurance, life insurance, health insurance, whatever matter. But you should be prepared for that. And in addition to that, what I call a fire extinguisher account. So you should have some money kept aside for rainy days. When something unforeseen happens, even before the insurance could help you, you should have something set aside to help you through tough times. And that's one of the lessons from the book as well. One of the advice, I think, where I slightly disagree with the author, he's saying that make your home a profitable investment. So he argues that you should not pay rent and you should move to the house, try to make investment properties out of it. It's good advice for some, but I don't think it's a universally good advice. If you are very good in maintaining and managing the houses, if you understand ins and outs of property investment, maybe it's a good idea. But there are other avenues for passive investment. For example, you could go through index tracking funds, which in a long run gives about the same returns as a house, but it has much less fluctuation and a little less risky than, say, the housing investment. However, it's
right.
not.
And this is a similar advice, I guess, which is also in Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? Where the asset which is not making money for you, or am I confusing the book?
Yeah. There is this advice in Rich Dad Poor that your assets should be making money for you, and you should be paying for those assets rather than depreciating assets. Basically, anything that's has a depreciating value should be paid assets that have appreciating value rather than you paying for it. But that's not the subject of our book. And just as a side, I don't like that Rich Dad Poor Dad book that much as well. But maybe that's a topic for another day, unless we get a good one.
Yep.
Sure. So the last lesson is about improving your ability to earn or investing in yourself. So
Hmm.
if you are 20 years old, you most likely are earning less than what a typical 40-year-old person earns, right? That means your per hour earning is less, your time is cheap. And
Hmm.
this is the best time to improve upon that investment of your time. You could read books, as we just talked about, or you could take online courses. I try to take the courses from the people who are expert in their field. This investment of your time in your skills are going to pay you many, many times back in terms of your earning, not only financial earning, but in terms of your outlook in life, your quality of life, your enjoyment, everything is going to improve. I was talking about the habits of millionaires and billionaires earlier, about reading the books. There's another book called Millionaire Next Door, and one of the things, common trait they have found in that book is that rich people get very solid education, financial education from their parents, and also they pass on similar education to their kids as well. So yeah, try to continuously improve yourself, try to learn, make the best use of your time. So these are the few lessons I think from this book, which are there. Personally, I have taken 3 action items out of it. It's always good to talk about lessons, but I can bet you will forget these lessons in few days if you do not take an action out of it. Action is what teaches you. So to me, the first action that I have taken and applied in my life is to improve my expenses to savings ratio. So I want to improve my savings, and my technique for that is pretty simple. Every few years, when my income increases, I just ensure that my expenses do not increase in the same ratio. Of course, my expense also increases with time, with due to inflation and the lifestyle creep and everything else. But I just ensure that, let's say, if my income has increased by 10%, my
Mhm.
expense increase by say 6% or 7% or 8% less than my increase in income, and this will automatically improve your ratio. So that's lesson number one.
This is despite all the pleasures of life that we cherish, right? You're not being.
Absolutely. You only live once. You do not have to sacrifice all those experiences per se. But as I mentioned, 5 or 10 years ago, when you were earning less, you were still enjoying your life, or weren't you? I hope you were not that miserable at that time. So if you could enjoy your life in less money, our parents, our grandparents, overall economically, in most cases, they all had much less income than what we had today. And it doesn't mean that they enjoyed their life any less than us, probably more. So if they
True
can
that.
do, we can do that as well. Okay, so that was my first action item. The second action item is about educating myself more in finance. We already talked about importance of education. I have set myself a goal to do 12 book reviews this year. Every book increases my knowledge. I have done 4 so far this year on my blog, and this is the 5th one. So hopefully by the end of May, I should be doing the 5th review as well. So this is like the action item for me. And the last one about the unforeseen events I talked about. So I have sorted out all my insurances, home, car, life, health, all kind of insurances, and I recommend it. The sooner you could do it, the better.
Right. So we have, a friend of ours has just commented on my Facebook. If the comment is not here, he says, inflation. Raja Ghulam Rasool, he's live with us, Abad, if you remember him from Fast. So he says about inflation. Raja, what do you mean inflation? Do you mean how do we account for inflation? What else? So do clarify that. So Ahmad, action number 1 from the book was to increase your savings versus expenses ratio. Action number 2 was improve your financial education. What is the third action that I could take or learn
Yeah,
from this?
yeah. You have to plan for unforeseen events in your life. You never know you're going to be alive or healthy tomorrow or not. So, but think that it might happen. Don't be scared of it. It could happen to anybody, but it happens rarely. But plan for it. Do the stuff today that could protect you if, God forbid, anything wrong happens in your life, with your health, with your house.
Right. And that is a firefighting account that you spoke about,
That's right.
and,
That's
and
right.
that's separate from the 10% account.
Uh, Ideally, I said it has to be 20%. So your 10% would be going for your investments, and the other 10% would be for those rainy days, or maybe you could break it down, say 15 and 5. So ideally, it should be the additional stuff, the additional on top of the 10%. But I just don't want to make it sound too hard. So if you can't do 20%, start with 10%. Maybe from that 10%, do a bit of your insurances and stuff like that. But once you become disciplined, I assure you, it is pretty easy to get to 20%.
So, Hamad, there are some people who say or feel or believe, or maybe it's a harsh reality, who cannot save 10% from their earnings. What does the book say about that? What does the richest man in
Yeah,
Babylon says about that?
there are two possible reasons for that. Either you're not earning enough, your earning is less, and obviously you need some money to do your basic expenses. And in that case, I mentioned earlier that pretty much shows that your time is cheap. You are earning less per hour. So if
Mhm.
you spend the same hour on improving your skills, that will pay you many times more compared to a rich person who's already earning a lot. His time is expensive. If I'm earning millions of dollars, and my 1 hour, taking that 1 hour aside for education might be a hard decision for me. But if I'm earning less, it's much easier for me to actually improve myself. So go through that part. Or the other thing is that where you're earning enough, but you're not disciplined enough. You just get tempted on your new car model or new iPhone model. And in that case, I said, just think of a jail if you don't pay that 10%.
Yeah, think of the patta or the, I won't do the gory part right now, but
Yeah.
uh, but yeah. So interesting. So all those who are live in our first ever episode of the virtual book club that we are creating, and we'll usually keep it. We'll try and keep it at a 30-minute conversation. Do share some of the books which you feel have changed your lives or have had a big impact on your life. In the comment box, do write what are some of the books that you would recommend highly, or some that have created a big impact on your life. There is one question which I'm gonna take, and then Hamad, as you said, we are not necessarily financial experts, so we would only reserve our comments based on the book and the learnings that we are getting from the book, because we're just discussing the book right now. The question is from Atia, and Atia says, in this existing scenario, what kind of ratio is suggestible to maintain in terms of cash versus investment? Do we still stick to 20%? What does the book say? Yeah.
Yeah, depends a lot on your existing expertise, what your knowledge is about the areas where you're invested in. And it also depends on the nature of the investment. Some investments are bound to be long term. If your money is in, for example, if it's in the stock market, you could be mostly assured that in a long term it's going to recover anyway. It will be better than a cash. But if you're invested in, let's say, an oil or gold, it might be a risky proposition. But you might know better than me. As Noman said, we are not financial experts. What I would say, just learning from this book, that if you could bear a long-term risk, if you think that you are young enough, maybe it's a good idea to minimize your cash savings and maximize your investments. In the long run, mostly these investments pay better. Raja Ghulam Rasool has a comment, as Naman said, about inflation. Your expenses will increase with inflation, but most of the investment options should be paying you above and beyond that inflation. So if inflation is 3%, you should be earning 6, 7, 8, whatever percentage on top of that inflation. But if you are, let's say, in a very late stage of your life, you are, say, in your 60s and 70s, it might not be a good idea. I would suggest, very common advice in this case is to increase your cash savings more than investment, because this is not the stage of life where you would want to afford losing a lot of money.
Yeah. So make sure that you look at your risk appetite the way it is. Ali Muhammad from Karachi has shared the book, The Leader Who Had No Title by Robin Sharma. That's a book that has impacted his life. And we had a question here from Shaina. So Shaina asked, I want to make a habit of reading books. Which is the best book to start with? Shaina, you've asked the wrong person. Hamad, I don't know what your take on this is, but I usually ask people, what do you want to learn? That's a wrong question to ask, honestly. And yet the most common question that I usually get when I'm talking about books. So Shaina, this is the most common question. But my thing is, what do you want to learn, or what are your interests in? Uh, I can recommend a book that I just loved, but it may not necessarily be true for you. So yeah, again, if you ask me that this is my particular interest, or this is what I want to learn, then I could probably share what is the best book to start with. But one thing that I usually share with people is that if you do not cherish reading books, this is something you don't really like doing, then probably start with fiction or novels, and just get to know the book a little bit better. Enjoy books, enjoy the feel of paper, and once you get addicted, trust me, it's very difficult to stay away from a book. Ahmad, your take on this?
Perfectly agree with your advice, Noman. Usually, when we think about books as a self-improvement books, we think of non-fiction books, and these are perfectly fine. But there's nothing wrong with fiction books. As I said, you can live 1,000 lives just by reading those books, and it's those fiction books that basically increase your horizon. They broaden your outlook on the life. So start with those. Those are usually interesting. But then it also depends on what kind of genre do you prefer. I really like, say, biographies of people. To me, these are as interesting as fiction books, reading about people's life, and it gives me a lot of motivation. So yeah, start with those books, and maybe at some point you might start liking more technical or more drier books in your area of interest.
And that's true. So some of my favorite books are biographies also. Jack Welch, his biography, I just loved it. It was this thick. These days, I'm trying to read Nelson Mandela's biography, which is this thick, if I can show that. Yeah, but I'm trying my level best. Great, Hamad. Thank you very much, guys. If you have any questions related to the richest man in Babylon, yeah, financial management, do put it in the comments, and we'll try to take it. This was the first episode of the Bibliophile Circle. We would be coming back. There would be different guests joining us. I'm sure Hamad would come back very soon with yet another book. I would be sharing personally my insights on a book called Essentialism next week. But the next episode of the Bibliophile Circle is on Monday at approximately 9 p.m. or 9:30 p.m. You will get the details on our YouTube channel, so make sure that you press the bell icon so you subscribe and you get the details whenever they come through, or on our Funworks Facebook page or on my personal Facebook page. The next book is about it's called Indestructible. So it's all about how you could avoid distractions in this age of a lot of distractions. So do join us for that. If you have any comments about this this particular episode, do share that. If you have any books to recommend, please share that. If you would want to come live and be part of this virtual club, do write to us on the Funworks Facebook page, and we'll connect and we can go live. So thank you very much, everyone who joined. This was all about the book called The Richest Men in Babylon, and about how you could manage yourself financially and how you should educate yourself with financial management, and with little increments every day, you could achieve financial independence. Hamad, thank you very much for joining. I know it's quite late in Sydney, but I know you're originally a Pakistani, so I'm sure you're not sleeping very early. And 10:30 is still Urdu mein jo kehte hain, raat abhi bhi jawan hai, I believe. So, but thank you very much for joining us, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks a lot, Noma. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and Hamad writes regular blogs, book reviews on his Instagram, and on Instagram, his handle is relaxed_gram. Relaxed_gram. If I can quickly put it over here, that's his Insta handle. So if you love books, do follow him. Thank you very much for all who joined us. We would be back with the second episode of the Bibliophile Circle, which is all about book lovers and books, on Monday night for me in Dubai, Monday late evening for Pakistan, and anywhere else in the world. It would probably be morning, evening, afternoon. Thank you very much for joining